Ayato was an ugly, disgusting, lonely loser, who was the strongest Genestella and the holder of the divine Swordsman, giving him the most overpowered physical abilities. As he entered his school for the first day, he saw a pink handkerchief falling from a window. But after parkouring to return it, he found a hot girl without any plot armor. Panicked at the sight of the first plot-filled girl he had seen, Ayato apologized and turned his face away so she could get into her clothes. Having returned the handkerchief to her, Julius thanked him for his kindness, but blasted his useless ass out of her room. Impressed by his maneuverability, she decided to play with him, and challenged Ayato to a duel to punish him for peeking at a girl undressing in her dorm. With no sword in his hand, someone from the crowd passed one to him, and he finally accepted the duel as he had no other option. Julius immediately launched energy blasts toward Ayato, but he was blocking all of them even though she was ranked 5th in the school in terms of power. Thinking that this attack would have turned an average opponent into smithereens, she charged up an explosive ball and exploded it when Ayato got close to it. But he had other intentions, and pierced the blast to rescue Julius from an assassination attempt. Julius got angry, but the student council president Claudia arrived, and told Julius that Ayato had yet to complete his final paperwork, so the duel against him was invalid. Walking around the school building with Claudia, Ayato was suddenly presented with the sight of her plot, and went to her office. Having officially been welcomed into Asterisk by Claudia, Ayato now has the responsibility to represent his school in the battle of supremacy that is held among the 6 great schools that admit the students who have Genestella, and they fight once a year in the tournament of Festa. As she was wondering why Ayato attended this school, he asked if his sister Haruka attended this school as well. He learned that she attended the school 5 years ago, but all data against her since she completed her education 5 years ago had been deleted. However, the Overlux sword, known as the Swordsman, that Haruka used still contained the combat data of her fights, and they could use that to find out about her. Hearing that, he thanked Claudia, and told her that his reason for joining this school was to search for what he was supposed to do in his life. Being a transferred student on scholarship, Ayato had the priority to use the Overlux weapons, and asked to take a look at Swordsman since his sister used it as well. But for now, he was given a temporary Lux sword. Out of nowhere, Claudia's hug fetish kicked in, and she hugged Ayato from behind, telling him that he had no more paperwork to do today, and just said that to save his ass from Julius. Going to his classroom for the first time, the teacher introduced Ayato as Julius' boyfriend, which she wasn't pleased about. Even though he had a history with her, Ayato still wanted to be friends with Julius, but she felt in debt to him as he saved her life, and offered to fulfill any wish he had. Heh boy. When she went away, Ayato took a walk with his classmate Yabuki and learned that she was a princess of an European country named Lysultania, which had turned into a monarchy after the inversion. Having learned from Yabuki that Julius doesn't let anyone get close to her, and fought duel after duel to climb up in the leaderboard, Ayato gave the Lux sword back to Yabuki that he lent him during his duel with Julius. Yabuki wondered how he knew it was his sword, but Ayato remembered his voice from when he had given the sword to him initially. Suddenly, their conversation was put to a halt when they saw Julius getting challenged to a duel by Lester, who was 9th on the leaderboard, having defeated him 3 times already. Julius doesn't want to duel him again, but he kept insisting as he wanted to win against the princess that dueled just for fun. But Julius didn't take lightly to that comment. With a golden fire aura erupting from her body, Julius told Lester that she doesn't duel for fun, and she intended to sweep the Festa. In a dream flashback, Haruka discussed Ayato's power with him, and explained to him that he wouldn't be able to use his power correctly until he found his purpose in life, and determined how he wanted to use it. When Ayato asked if she's found her purpose, she responds that the most important thing for her is to protect Ayato, and she hugged him. Ayato told Haruka that he too will defend her, and as she smiled, Ayato awakened from his dream on his bed, next to Yabuki. After Julius became enraged at Lester, Ayato stepped in and tried talking to him, but he just lashed out and vowed to make Julius acknowledge her. With Lester out of the equation, Ayato wondered why she wanted to fight here as she is a princess. But Julius needed money, and wanted to conquer the tag team tournament Phoenix Festa, but she hadn't found a partner for herself. After learning about the kind of partner she was looking for, Yabuki could never get into her pants, and as he didn't meet any of the requirements, he just went away. Before Julius also went on her way, Ayato asked her about the directions to the dorm room, and saw Julius laughing for the first time. Remembering that Julius wanted to return the favor to him for saving her, he wanted Julius to show him around the academy and city since he doesn't know much about this area. Julius found it a simple request compared to what he did for her and immediately agreed. The next day in school, the students saw Julius greeting someone for the first time, and Ayato met her childhood friend Saya, who went overseas. After showing Ayato how tall she had gotten, Saya told Ayato that she joined this school because of her dad, who wanted her to advertise the gun he invented, but she had her own reasons for joining this school as well. With their homeroom classes concluded, the teacher wanted students to act responsible and punched Saya on the head, as she was absent yesterday because she overslept, and ordered her to take a makeup class. Having attended their classes for today, Julius got ready to give a tour to Ayato around the academy, but Saya interrupted since Julius seemed hesitant, and the two girls began to debate on who would be a better guide. Claudia appeared out of nowhere, hugging Ayato from behind, and declared that she was the most qualified to show him around, as she had attended Sadouken before Saya and Julius. She returned to business, informing Ayato that his Overlux weapon selection and compatibility test would occur the following day, and handed him paperwork to sign. Ayato inquired if the two were friends, to which both responded yes and no simultaneously. Julius argued that they were only long-time acquaintances and asked Claudia to leave, to which Saya agreed with. The girls started to argue again, and Ayato suggested they both work together to show him around. Even though Saya wanted to show him around, she didn't know about most of the places herself, and amazed Julius with her dumbness. After Ayato went away to buy some drinks, Saya learned that she dueled Ayato, and thought that there was no way she would have survived the duel with Ayato since her powers were on her level, and Ayato was way more powerful than that. As their argument started to heat up, the girls got attacked by some assassin, and they immediately took care of them, with Saya using a fucking big-ass grenade launcher that was 10 times her size. Having bought the drinks, Ayato arrived back and saw the girls all wet, covering her plot with her arms. Julius realized that Saya didn't wear any plot coverage, and panicked at her lewdness, but Saya doesn't need to wear anything, as her plot was basically non-existent. After hearing about the incident tomorrow, Claudia issued an investigation about the assassination attempt on Julius, but they had yet to find any useful clues, and Julius wasn't cooperating as well, as she refused to take any guards with her. Coming out of the elevator to the testing room, the two found Lester, who was here as an Overlux applicant as well. Claudia explained that if the compatibility rate is above 80%, the applicants were allowed to check out the e-pawn. And among all the Overlux present there, Lester chose Haruka's Overlux Swordsman. He held the Swordsman in his hands, and Ayato felt a strange feeling in his heart. Swordsman had a will of its own, and refused to let Lester get any close to it. Claudia felt that Lester couldn't get the weapon out of force, as she was an Overlux user as well, and the compatibility rate started to drop into negative numbers. Having taken care of Lester, Swordsman focused its attention on Ayato, but he dodged all of its attacks before he managed to capture the sword. His compatibility rate turned out to be 97%, but he was left with a bruise on his hand. After bandaging his hand, Claudia requested Ayato to spare some time for her, and invited him to her room. Arriving at Claudia's dorm room, he called for her, and she came out of the shower in her bathrobes. Looking at her exposed plot, Ayato turned red like a tomato, and they sat together to talk with each other. Ayato looked at the spacious room, and wondered if it was the perk of being the student council president. But Claudia was a top-tier student, and got this private room because of it. With the student council job being full of rough, hard jobs, Ayato wondered why she was doing all this work. But Claudia told him that she loved getting rough, hard jobs. What do you mean by that? Coming back to the reason for why she invited Ayato, Claudio showed him the profiles of the students who were supposed to take part in the Phoenix Festa, but they were all injured by mysterious individuals. The disciplinary committee suspected Lester and his subordinate Randy, as they didn't have an alibi for what they were doing when the students were attacked. Knowing that Julius was the next target, Ayato had to stay close to her, as she might not be able to handle the attack all by herself, and Ayato was close to her even though she wouldn't admit it. いいのですよ。遠慮なさらずに、どうぞ。Yes, yes, yes, yes. ごめん、それさ、そういうことだ。No, no, no. Shit. The next day, Julius met Ayato in casual clothing to show him around the city, and Ayato couldn't help but find her cute as hell. After showing him the arenas where the Festa tournament takes place, the two decided to go to McDonald's, what a fucking original name, to eat some burgers. As she was enjoying her burger, Ayato wanted her to realize that she couldn't afford to go out alone or duel anyone. But Julius didn't want to divert from her path because of some cowards. With his subordinates, Lester eavesdropped on their conversation and challenged Julius to another duel. But Ayato stepped up for her and told Lester that if he would duel her here, it would make him seem like the person that was trying to assassinate Julius. Enraged by his comments, Lester would be happy to duel with him as he compared him to the cowards who sneakily attacked Julius. But his subordinates stepped in to take him away, saying that he would never do something as cowardly to attack someone in their duel. When they went away, Julius was surprised by his heroism and wiped the ketchup from his face. Going back to the dorms, a group of students tried to fake a brawl in an attempt to surround Julius, but our heroes were smart and saw right through it. After defeating everyone, Julius asked a dude with a weird hairstyle about the person who hired his group for this job, and he immediately pointed out that the person is right behind them in the woods. As the culprit started running away, Julius and Ayato chased after him, but they were attacked by other people who were hiding in the trees. Having wrecked his shirt and Luck's sword, the assailants ran away, and Ayato went to Julius's dorm room at night as she invited him. Reaching there, Julius asked Ayato to remove his clothes, making him embarrassed, so Julius told him to get his head out of the gutter, as she only intended to sew his ripped shirt. As she was sewing his shirt, Ayato wondered if she learned this skill from her friends back in her country, and saw her childhood picture with her friends. When she was a child, Julius acted as a rebellious kid and often escaped from the castle. But one day, she lost her way in the slums and got dragged into an alley by some thugs, but some kids rescued her, and they later became her friends. Returning back to her castle, she learned that the kids who saved her life lived in an orphanage in the slums that her late mother funded. But since she had died, the fund had run dry. It was getting harder to run the orphanage, so in order to save their future, she joined the Seidokan Academy to win the Festa tournament and win some money for her friends. After his shirt was fixed, Julius gave it back to Ayato and mentioned that her pink handkerchief was a gift from her friends, who took turns to do the embroidery on it. The next day in school, Julius received a mysterious letter from someone, inviting her to a construction site at 5 p.m. But she didn't mention it to Ayato and went there all by herself. Telling about this letter to Claudia, Ayato thought that the letter might have come from the person who tried to attack her, and wondered if she still didn't trust him as she hid it from him. But Claudio told her that this was her way of protecting him. Hearing this, he immediately went after her, and Claudia gave him the Cervesta sword as his Luck's sword had broken earlier while fighting the assassins. Jumping off the school's building, Ayato realized that protecting Julius was written in his destiny, and he joined the school because of that. Reaching the construction site, a huge piece of concrete dropped on Julius's head, but she managed to block it with her powers. There was no way a small attack like that was sufficient to beat her, and she demanded the person who called her to show up. And it turned out to be one of Lester's subordinates, Norman. Julius had realized that Norman was the one behind all the attacks because of the words he said to Lester when he last approached her. Norman found Lester a nuisance when he attacked Julius as he ruined his plans, and Julius came all this way as Lester had planned to attack Ayato as well. If she doesn't want that to happen, Julius had to withdraw from the Phoenix Festa, but she doesn't intend to do that, and got ready to fight him, when suddenly, Lester showed up and cursed Norman for attacking Julius secretly. Norman felt that everyone at Asterisk was fighting for themselves, and didn't find it wrong to make some extra money. By making both Julius and Lester come here, Norman intended to kill both of them, and make it seem like they killed each other in a duel so all the blame would fall on Lester. Enraged by hearing this, Lester attacked Norman with his Luck's axe, but Norman's minions stopped it with his hands. His minions turned out to be puppets that he could control, but Lester didn't care about it, and threw the minions towards the concrete pillar with his attack. But it didn't seem to have much of an effect, as he was showered by bullets afterward and left wounded. Lester overestimated his powers, and told Norman that he could defeat any number of puppets he would summon. So he did just that, and summoned a whole fucking army that immediately got the better of Lester, as the puppets surrounded her as well. Julius tried to clear the area with a fire dragon, and clashed with robots that approached her head-on. When one of the puppets managed to grab her, a rain of bullets was poured on her, but she blocked it with the fire dragon. However, one of the bullets managed to graze her leg, and she was held with his back on the pillar by Norman's puppets. Unable to do anything, she discovered that the Arlequin Academy was behind these attacks, as no other academy could produce these types of puppets. Hearing this, there was no way Norman could leave her alive, and he ordered a puppet to split Julius into 2 pieces, but Ayato managed to save her in the nick of time. since it wasn't his problem. Ayato didn't have to do all this, but like Julie's, he had a will of his own, and found out that his purpose after coming to the academy was to help Julie's. Their conversation was interrupted by Norman, who still had over 100 puppets left, and ordered them to go after the two, but Ayato had Sir Versta in hand, and used its powers to cut the puppets one by one. Shocked by his powers, Norman decided to go all out himself, and arranged his puppets into a formation. But Ayato managed to dodge all of their attacks, while carrying Julie's at the same time. He had realized that Norman could only control 6 puppets at once, while the rest followed a certain pattern of movement that allowed him to dodge them easily. Enraged by this, Norman ordered his puppets to demolish Ayato, but he continued to cut them one by one until only Norman was left. Out of desperation, he summoned the queen puppet, and it chased after Ayato like a gorilla. But he used his sword style to remove all of the puppet's limbs and turned it into small metal chunks. Realizing that he had been defeated, Norman got on top of a puppet in an attempt to escape, but Julie's used her powers to give Ayato wings, and they chased after Norman, ultimately destroying the puppet he was flying on, and dropped him in an alleyway where Claudia was waiting for him. As the fight was over, Ayato felt a backlash from using his real powers, as his sister had put a binding on him to imprison his savage powers. Waking up after going unconscious, Ayato found his head resting on Julie's lap, and immediately tried to get up. But Julie's put him back into her lap. After learning from Ayato that his sister had imprisonment power, and used it to put a limit on his powers, she wondered why she would do such a thing. But Ayato doesn't have the answer for that himself, and he can't ask her about it since she had been missing for 5 years. As she still didn't have a tag partner for the Phoenix Festa, he asked if he could be one. But Julie's refused because Ayato could only use his real powers for a short time, and may end up like this after each fight. But Ayato didn't have a problem with risking his life, and forced Julie's until she eventually agreed. As they sat together hopeful under a starry sky, Claudia ripped Norman to shreds, and made Yabuki think that she had killed him, but she only left her bloody and battered, and didn't intend to kill him as she wants to use the leverage of this to make Allrequient Academy owe them. Meanwhile, some mysterious girls from the Allrequient Academy are spying on them through a surveillance camera. They said that Norman did a better job than they expected him to do, and taking care of a half-baked guy like Ayato at the Phoenix Festa shouldn't be a problem for them. At the Seidoukan Academy, a meeting took place amongst the student council presidents of all the great academies. But the world-famous diva, Sylvia, of the Queenvale Academy was nowhere to be seen, which infuriated Derek, who belonged to the Wolf Black Institute. Enraged by his insulting critique towards Sylvia, the student council president of the St. Galahadworth Academy, Ernest, held his sword against Dirk's neck, and Zing couldn't hold back her excitement as well. However, the two decided to stop their childish horseplay, and when their argument was over, Dirk wanted to discuss the rumors of Allrequient developing a new type of Lux. Since Allrequient was light years ahead in terms of technology, and with secret deals being prohibited between the academies, all the presidents wondered how Claudia even managed to secure this deal. But the Seidoukan Academy was taking care of all the expenses. Rushing to the school since he was late for practice, Ayato accidentally crashed into Kirin, and they both fell on the floor. Her plot was being revealed, so she immediately covered herself. Ayato reached out his hand to help her get up, and there was something stuck in her head that made her panic. But Ayato gently took it off, and her uncle Taudu called her back. After securing another girl in his harem collection, Ayato went to the training area to practice with Julie's for the upcoming Phoenix Festa. She showered him with a barrage of spells, but he dodged all of them with his swift movement, and continued toward Julie's. But she had placed a hidden spell on the ground that was activated when Ayato stepped on it. Engulfed in flames, he used the Amagiri sword style to pull through it, and got the better of Julie's. Having practiced with Julie's a lot, Ayato could use his true power for up to 3 minutes now with no side effect. But he would need to do better than that if he wanted to win against the overpowered student council presidents of the other academies and Ophelia, who won the last 2 festas in a row. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by Saya and Lester, as they wanted to train as well. But their practice was interrupted when Claudia barged into the training area with Camilla and Ernesta. Learning that the 2 schools had formed a contract to develop a new type of Lux, Julie's immediately realized Claudia made them agree with it, in return for not reporting the attacks conducted by the puppets that Ernesta had made. With Ayato present there, Ernesta wanted to check out the swordsman that shredded her puppets, and gave him a kiss that wasn't taken well by Julie's and Saya. They never got the chance to touch Ayato, so they got angry and pulled out their weapons, only for Camilla to point out all the flaws in Saya's weapon. After all, it was outdated and developed by her father Sasamiya, who was casted out of all requint for coming up with goofy weapons. Saya wanted to force Camilla to take back her words, but there was no way she would duel her right now, and Ernesta suggested her to take out her hatred at the Phoenix Festa. With the Arlequin girls gone, Saya announced her desire to take part in the Phoenix Festa as well, and wanted Ayato to be her partner. But since he was already partnered with her, Julius was having none of that shit, and they got into a tug-of-war match with Ayato as the rope. After freeing himself from the hands of those horny girls, Ayato walked around the academy and saw Kirin getting slapped by her uncle Taudu. As he was about to deliver another one, Ayato stepped in and held his hand. Ayato disapproves of violence and was forced to get into a duel with Kirin if he wanted Taudu to not hit Kirin anymore. Even though he was reluctant to duel her, Ayato eventually agreed as he wanted better living conditions for Kirin, and pulled out the Ogre Lux. Kirin immediately chased after Ayato and started to swing her sword, but she didn't expect Ayato to be this strong as he was dodging all her attacks. With the fight going on for above 3 minutes, Ayato planned to wait till the last second to dodge her attack and win the fight, but Kirin managed to pull an Uno reverse and cut the school badge on his blazer to win the fight. Julius was also watching the fight and wanted Ayato to explain why he was dueling with the rank 1 of Sadouken Academy. After Kirin won her duel against Ayato, Taudu took her away and reminded her that she had nothing going on for her. He told her that she was a useless imbecile that he brought to rank 1, and if she wanted to have her dreams fulfilled, she needed to do what he was telling her to. With his fight concluded, Julius took Ayato away to rest, as he was drained physically because of using his true powers for an extended amount of time. He expected her to be mad at him for dueling Kirin without her approval, but Julius was actually really affectionate, and would have gotten mad if Ayato didn't step in to help Kirin, as she would have done the same thing if she was there. Hearing all the nice remarks from her, Julius couldn't help but turn into a beetroot. However, she was still somewhat angry at him for losing the duel. She felt irrational and wanted Ayato to win, but gave props to Kirin as well for being so powerful. But Julius didn't want him to keep focusing on her. There were 3 people at the Sadouken Academy that Julius couldn't defeat, and it included him, Claudia, and Kirin. Claudia ranked 2nd in the academy, and wielded an Ogre Lux Pandora that allowed her to see 10 seconds into the future, and she remained undefeated in the academy just like Kirin. But the one thing that set Kirin apart was that she didn't have an Ogre Lux in her arsenal, and just used a normal Japanese sword. Since Kirin demolished his school badge, Ayato went to get a new one from Claudia, who was enjoying her plot development time at the Student Council recreational facility. Claudia understood that he had to battle Kirin because of her uncle, but he was an employee of the Integrated Enterprise Foundation that ran the academy, and was responsible for scouting the students of this academy. Given his position, he tried to get the best out of her niece, but he couldn't do anything because of his high position. Walking back to his dorm, Ayato was thinking about what Claudia had told him, and found Kirin waiting outside the dorm for him. Kirin wanted to thank Ayato for protecting her from her uncle, even though she was a stranger to him. But Ayato didn't want her gratitude as he failed to win the duel anyways, so he just gave her a pat on the head and told her to shut her useless ass the fuck up already, because it's no wonder no one loves her. Emotional damage. Since there were people eavesdropping on them, they went for a walk around the academy, but Kirin felt weird walking with him, as she had never walked with a man who wasn't her relative before. Ayato knew about her sword style, as it was an ancient one like his, and Kirin started to explain their fight earlier to the tiniest details. Kirin felt like a klutz and a coward since she was pretty much useless at everything else, and the only time she felt happy was when she held her sword. Wondering why she put up with her abusive uncle, Kirin told Ayato that she was doing all this to save her father. Even though his uncle was a cunt, she still felt indebted to him, as he made her climb to the top, and he compensated for it by acting as the shittiest person ever, as he hated the Genestella. After she was done explaining her sob-ass story, Kirin mentioned that she didn't have anyone to spar with, and asked Ayato about his training. Hearing this, he invited her to his training sessions with Julius and the others, but she couldn't join them as her uncle doesn't want her to show her style to everyone. So Ayato invited her to his early morning training. As he walked Kirin to her dorm at night, Saya jumped at him out of nowhere and demanded Ayato to tell her about the girl he was with. The days passed with Ayato training with Kirin in the morning, and one day, he saw Julius and asked her to join him for lunch. She wanted to ask Ayato about the time he was spending with Kirin, and accidentally ordered a spicy curry for herself. After learning that he practiced with Kieran in the morning, she forced herself to eat the spicy curry. But it was too much for her to handle, so Ayato offered to trade their lunches. When she didn't give an answer, Ayato thought that she didn't like to eat from someone else's plate. But Julies wanted to act responsible by eating the thing she ordered. Ayato reminded her that these trivial things shouldn't be a matter of concern among partners, and traded the lunch with her, only to set his ass on fire with the spicy curry. At the Arlequin Academy, Camilla woke up Ernest as Ayato and Kieran were on the move, since they had plotted to attack them again to learn more about Ayato's power. Going on with their daily morning training, Ayato noticed that the fog was denser than usual, and they decided to hold hands with each other, only to let go as they felt some strange presence coming their way. As they were thinking about where it could be coming from, some strange creatures surrounded them, and one of them attacked Ayato, but he managed to stop him by shoving his luck sword at his mouth. When the creature attacked again, Ayato cut off its leg, but the creature regenerated it instantly, and moved together as a group to attack him. Using his ancient sword style, he turned all of them into minced meat. But the creatures recovered their whole body in an instant. Since usual slashing and thrusting didn't work on them, Kieran realized that they were probably robots and had a core, so she cut one of the creatures into tiny pieces until its core was revealed and destroyed it. Looking at the core, Ayato realized that this was the job of those Arlequin scums. But he didn't have much time to think about it as the creatures had started throwing fireballs at him. As he was running away from them, a sinkhole appeared beneath his feet, and he almost fell into it. But Kieran managed to grab his hand in the nick of time. However, the ground beneath Kieran gave out, and they both fell into the sinkhole together. Dropping into the sinkhole, Kieran held on to Ayato, as there was water all around them, and she didn't know how to swim. After looking at her plot, Ayato's Excalibur started to unsheath, but his fun time was interrupted by a huge f***ing dragon. With no options left, he unlocked his secret powers to block the dragon's attack, and got thrown into a wall. Kieran wanted Ayato to let go of her if she was in his way, since she doesn't want anyone to get hurt because of her, as someone always ended up paying a price for helping her. But Ayato cheered her up and gave her a pat on the head. After Kieran calmed down, Ayato used his Servista to make a place for Kieran to sit, and cut the head of the dragon as it approached him again. But like the rest of the creatures, the dragon regenerated it quickly. The dragon had a core as well, but it was constantly moving around its body, so the only option left for him was to use his prana to make his Servista bigger and cut the dragon in half along with its core. However, he suffered the effects of using too much of his power for a prolonged time, and screamed in pain until he went unconscious and fell into Kieran's arms. The rescue team arrived and rescued them from the sinkhole. Kieran went back to Taudu, who doesn't want her to get close to Ayato since he recently got into some trouble with Arlequin, and it would be a hassle if he dragged her into his mess. However, Kieran told him that she wouldn't ever stop talking to her new friend, and after he heard those words, Taudu slapped Kieran. But Kieran wanted to go down her own path now, and blocked his next blow. As he was standing there shocked, Kieran told him that she would decide things for herself now, and would duel the person she wanted to. The next day arrived, and Kieran was in an arena with Ayato as she challenged him to a duel. Julies felt worried as he had already lost to her before, but Saya told her that he was used to fighting people stronger than him. Even Lester thought that he had something up his sleeve, as he had requested his Lux before going into the fight. When their duel started, Kieran immediately charged at Ayato with a combination of attacks, but Ayato blocked everything using his Lux sword and the prana that surrounded his body. With her attacks not working, Kieran combined the 49 attack skills she knew in a way that Ayato wouldn't be able to dodge. But he powered up as well, and used a smoke screen to equip a Lux spear, throwing Kieran off guard. Even though it worked a bit, Kieran continued to press on Ayato after he threw his spear at her, and pulled out a pair of Lux daggers. When she parried the daggers, Kieran thought that she had won. But the cheeky f***er knew grappling as well, and slammed Kieran to the ground to win the duel. With the duel concluded, Julies and Saya congratulated him for winning against the top rank of their school, and Claudia arrived soon after with Kieran. She immediately requested Ayato to let her join his training sessions, and told everyone that he had invited her earlier, but she had to refuse because of her uncle. Even though Julies had some mixed feelings, she eventually accepted to let Kieran join their training session. But the little happiness she felt was destroyed by her uncle, who came to get her back. He let his fist do the talking, and tried to punch Kieran, but Ayato blocked it as he had no business with her anymore. He tried to blackmail her by saying that he would tell everyone about her father, but Claudia had enough of his bullshit, and threatened to tell her mother, who ranked higher than him, if he continued trying to corrupt Kieran's mind. Hearing this, Taudu started to walk off the room in horror, and Kieran thanked him for everything he had done for her all this while. But he didn't utter a word and went away. With Kieran joining the training season as well, Saya had partnered with her, but they were struggling to deal with the practice dummies as they lacked any kind of teamwork. Having won the duel against Kieran, Ayato's popularity grew around the school, as girls would often come to him for autographs. Sitting in the cafeteria, all the girls were jealous as Ayato turned into a chick magnet, but it was bound to happen as he had just defeated the strongest student of his school. Saya, Kieran and her classmates had become a fan of Ayato as well, and Julies wondered what they would do if they got to fight them at the Phoenix Festa, as they had grown too fond of him. Hearing this, Saya felt like she needed to strengthen her relationship with Kieran so they could work better as a team, and told everyone that they would be skipping the practice tomorrow. However, Saya ended up being the first one to express what she liked to do and wanted to go shopping. She couldn't normally do this simple task, as she was directionally challenged, and would end up in the opposite corner of the city despite using a GPS. So together, the girls go shopping to buy a gift for Saya's father, but they couldn't find anything suitable for him, since he was a mad scientist that liked to build goofy-ass weapons. Saya showed the directions of a luxe weapon shop, and asked Kieran if she would take her there. Arriving near the shop, stairs suddenly engulfed them, but they continued to move on into the shop. When they got there, Saya found a special luxe gun, and bought it even when the shopkeeper told her that it was a piece of hunk. Kieran wondered why she would buy a flawed luxe weapon, so Saya told her that this luxe model had a special generator, but it had durability issues, and was discontinued, but his father would appreciate a gift like this. Having done what Saya wanted to, it was now Kieran's turn, so she asked Saya to take her to a water park, as she wanted to learn how to swim. While helping her swim, Saya thought that she should have asked Ayato to help her, but Kieran wanted to surprise him and make him see her in a favorable way. Happy at what she said, Saya considered her a formidable enemy, as they were after the same Excalibur, and went to buy drinks for the both of them. While she was away, Kieran continued to swim on her own, and accidentally crashed into Violet, who was a student of the Queen Male Academy. Violet immediately started to get aggressive towards her, when suddenly she realized that she was the famous Lightning Blade Speed, and her whole demeanor changed towards Kieran. However, she couldn't help but laugh when she learned that the former rank 1 of the Sadaukan High School didn't know how to swim, and went back to being a bitch. Looking at this commotion from outside the pool, Saya threw a floatable mat on Violet, and told her to stop mocking her partner. When Violet learned that Saya was unranked in her academy, she started being a bitch towards her as well, and challenged her to a duel. With a calm look on her face that infuriated Violet, Saya agreed to the duel, and everyone at the pool party gathered around to witness this battle. When the duel started, Saya summoned a fucking railgun, and yeeted Violet to the opposite end of the pool. The day passed, and when the sun was setting, Saya and Kieran sat together at the edge of a pool to drink their cocktails. Saya wanted Kieran to stop taking shit from others, and told her to be proud of herself. But Kieran was used to this kind of treatment because of her uncle, so Saya told her to fix this issue, and continued to compliment her until her eyes became watery. The next day, the duo went on with their usual training session. But this time, they were working with perfect coordination, and managed to get a higher score than Ayato and Julie's, making them wonder what the hell they did in a single day. Along with his subordinate, Dirk visited a prisoner named Irene, and told her to take part in the Phoenix Festa to destroy Ayato. But he wouldn't mind if she won the whole thing as well. Ayato's Servista was a huge problem for Dirk, so he wanted to get rid of it now. After confirming that her sister would be protected, Irene agreed to the offer, as she was bored after living in confinement for so long. At the opening ceremony of the Phoenix Festa, a huge crowd gathered around, and the chairman Mesa gave a speech to the people. Unlike the previous festas, Mesa gave permission to use autonomous objects, and also allowed participants to substitute themselves with puppets. Having attended the opening ceremony, Julies and Ayato planned on having a light lunch, as there was still some time until their match was scheduled. Lester was also present there, so Ayato invited him for lunch, and thanked him for lending him his lux on the day he dueled Kieran. Lester wasn't really good with compliments, and just told him to not lose until he reaches his level. Saya jumped out of nowhere, and gave Ayato a heart attack by hugging his arm, and Kieran arrived there as well. But Ayato wondered where they had been as he was searching for them. The two went to prepare lunch for everyone, and would like Ayato to accept it as a token of appreciation. He opened the lunchbox to see some beautifully made rice balls, and patted Kieran in the head. Saya made the same dish as well, but her dish looked like it was made at the depths of hell. However, Hayato still had to pat her since she was a bitch that demanded attention, and Julie secretly wanted the pat as well, but couldn't muster up the courage to ask Hayato. After munching on the food, Hayato thanked the food gods, and they got ready to watch the tournament's live stream. The festa would go on for 2 weeks, with the first week being the elimination round that will wither down the teams from 256 to 32, and the second week will hold the main event. For the second match of the first day, Hayato and Julies were called onto the arena, and Hayato was introduced as the prodigy who managed to become rank 1 of the Seidokan Academy in just a few weeks, and moreover, he was the only rank 1 in this tournament. When Julies was introduced, the whole crowd went wild over her beauty, and both of them jumped into the arena for their first battle. Julies had predicted that their opponents would prefer close-range combat, so she left the opponents to Hayato and stayed behind. Summoning his inner powers, Hayato broke the shackles around his savage forces, cutting the badges of both enemies in the blink of an eye using his ogre lux. In awe of what they saw, the whole crowd cheered the flamboyant and effortless display of power from Hayato. For round 1, the duo didn't reveal their teamwork patterns, and no one found out about the limit on Hayato's power since he ended the fight in a split second. After giving a post-fight interview, the two went back to meet their friends. Even though their fight was exciting, Yabuki wasn't there to cheer them on, as he knew that they would win without a doubt. And the real reason he arrived there was to watch the third match that had Arlequin's puppets in it. Humans manipulate most combat puppets externally, but they can't defeat the Genestella kids with the puppets since their reaction time is too slow. As the commentator was about to talk about some positive things about the puppet, Ernesta sent her a memo that said that both puppets are able to act autonomously, and the male was named Ard while the female was RMC. Their opponents got ready for the fight, but Ard wasn't there to win, but to show everyone his dignity, so he gave his enemies 1 minute to attack them with all their might, and vowed not to lift a finger during that time. Enraged by his bluntness, RMC shot Ard on the head, and told him to get his empty brain fixed at the maintenance as he was making the fight difficult for no reason. But Ard wanted to put on a display for everyone to enjoy, and make the people realize how competent they were. Not wanting to dishonor Ernesta, RMC refused to go back on what Ard proposed, and also promised to not attack for 1 minute, so their opponents immediately chased after the puppets. The gray-haired guy, Mortis, turned his arms into typhoons and attacked Ard, but the puppet effortlessly blocked the attack with his shield. 15 seconds had passed, and Moritz still couldn't land a hit, so he wanted to change his strategy, but got shocked when he saw RMC shooting the bullets fired from his teammate, Jerd's gun. Having only 30 seconds left, Moritz at his pants, wondering what the puppets would do when they started to attack, so he charged his powers to the maximum and hit Ard with all his might, but the overpowered puppets didn't receive a scratch and ended the fight instantly. Everyone was shocked at the puppets' overwhelming display of powers, and Hayato wondered what would happen if these puppets decided to come after his ass. The light barrier that Ard used to block the enemy's attack was going to be a pain in the ass for others, and Julie thought that they would need some serious firepower to break through it. Seiya suddenly received a call from her father Sasamiya, who told everyone that the puppets were too advanced to be controlled by humans, and they were probably AI. He had sent a new weapon to Seiya, but it won't be there for her first match since she didn't receive it yet, so he wanted her to go to the customs to get it. With her puppets winning the fight, Ernesta was proud of their great performance, and Ard told her not to expect anything less from him. RMC felt this comment was arrogant, so she dropped her partner on the floor for disrespecting their master. Even though their stats were equal, Ard still felt helpless against RMC, and learned that men always feel helpless in front of the woman they love. Having trained for a long time, Hayato and Julies tried to rush back to the arena, as they didn't want to miss the fight of their friends. But they stopped when they saw a huge crowd watching Irene beat a bunch of goons. When Irene looked at Hayato, she immediately recognized him as her target and approached him. But Julies placed herself between them, and told Irene to move the fuck off. However, the two had to go back when Irene summoned her ogre Lux immediately. But Irene's aggression was soon put to a stop by Irene's sister Priscilla. She apologized to Julies and Hayato, and forcefully made Irene bow to them as well. After they went away, Julies realized that Irene was targeting Hayato for some reason, and her being from the Rewolf Academy made her sure that she was up to something evil. Meanwhile, Kirin and Seiya's match was about to start, and Seiya was angry that Hayato still hadn't arrived to witness them fight. With their fight started without Hayato and Julies arriving there, she summoned her railgun and went after the enemy with a bandit Lux sword, while Kirin fought with the bare-fisted guy. He elegantly parried her slashes a few times with his fists, but Kieran turned out to be too much for him to handle. Saya traded blows with her enemy, but they were both on equal grounds until Saya decided to bully to out of him and fried his circuits with her huge railgun. The days continued to pass, and on the 5th day of the Phoenix Festa, Julius and Ayato had to fight Yanon and Yasuga from Queenvale Academy in the tournament's second round. Since she left everything to Ayato in the first round, Julius wanted to fight this battle by herself, and fought with the two sword-wielding girls alone. After blocking their initial onslaught, Julius rained fire on Yasuga and immediately broke her badge. Yanon was able to slice through her attacks, but she eventually got caught in a trap spell placed by Julius and got eliminated soon after. With their second round being a walk in the park as well, the two sat together for a cup of tea, and Julius embarrassingly gave some sandwiches to Ayato. The sandwiches turned out to be really tasty, but Ayato didn't pat her like he did the others, and it made her angry. She felt that it was unfair, and made Ayato pat her even though she felt embarrassed about it. However, she started to want some plot development, so she immediately got up and connected to the live stream of the Phoenix Festa, where Lester and Randy were fighting with Irene and her sister. They were trying to avoid being targeted by constantly moving, as Irene's Ogre Lux Gravy Sheath tired its user fast, and he planned to drag out this fight to give them an advantage. However, Irene had experienced this situation before in her life, and put Randy on the ground with her Gravy Sheath whilst kicking Lester in the face. As Lester was lying on the ground, she rendered Randy unconscious and eliminated him. Seeing his comrade defeated, Lester powered up and attacked Irene with all her might. She tried to block the attack initially, but the force was strong with this one, and she got thrown into a wall. To replenish her energy, she sucked the bodily fluids of her sister. Sorry, I meant sucked her blood. But it wasn't dangerous as Priscilla had excellent regenerative abilities and could even regenerate her blood, so she was basically a walking blood bag for Irene. Approaching Lester, Irene told him that her Ogre Lux seeks blood in returns of its power, and by wielding the weapon, the user would drain themselves eventually, so Gravy Sheath transforms them into a vampire to allow its wielder to absorb blood. With her powered-up weapon, she intensified the gravity around Lester and threw gravity magic balls towards him that he barely managed to block. As he was about to retaliate, Irene intensified the gravity even more and put her Gravy Sheath on his neck to make him tap out of the fight. After 3 more days, Ayato and Julius had made it to the final, and Claudia thought that there was a lot of burden on his shoulders, so she wanted to give him a taste of her juicy plot. But unfortunately, Ayato had to go since Saya got lost, and he had to help Kieran look for her. Claudia was angry at him for leaving her hanging, but Ayato promised to make up for it later with his Excalibur. While looking for Saya, Ayato ran into Priscilla, who was running from some goons. The goons seemed to recognize Ayato from somewhere, so he decided not to fight them, and took Priscilla to the roof of a nearby building. Wondering why a good girl like Priscilla had goons running after her, Ayato learned that Irene made a mess at a nearby casino, and the goons had been chasing her since then. Still, she didn't want Ayato to think badly of her sister, as despite being ill-mannered, she was a good person at heart. Out of nowhere, Irene came flying from the sky, thinking that Ayato was doing frisky things to her sister. But Priscilla tried to tell her the real story. However, she was still bent on teaching Ayato a lesson until Priscilla stepped up for him. Irene asked what he was doing in an alleyway, but before he could answer, he received a call from Saya, who had managed to meet up with Kieran. After learning that he was looking for a lost friend, she didn't want to be indebted to Ayato, and showed him that his final battle was with her. Enraged because of the goons targeting her sister, Irene went back to Dirk guns blazing, and reminded him that she won't be cooperative towards him if any harm came to her sister. There were some people at Werewolf Academy that wouldn't even listen to Dirk, but he didn't find it to be a huge problem if her sister got hurt, as she could just regenerate. Enraged by his comments, Irene attacked Dirk, but managed only to scratch his cheek a little. After things settled out between them, and Irene goes away, Dirk orders his assistant Corona to do a reading to see who would win the Phoenix Festa. She performed her magic, and gave Dirk the good news that Irene and her sister would win. At their training area, Julius learned that Ayato was invited to dinner by Irene and Priscilla, and got angry since her partner just accepted an invitation from their enemies. So she decided to go with him to make sure that no one else could unsheath his Excalibur. Going into Priscilla's home, Irene was nicer than usual, and Priscilla brought some good-looking food for everyone. Irene immediately wanted to get her hands on the food, but Priscilla told her to let the guests eat the food first. After they ate the food, Priscilla went away, and Irene told the two that she had borrowed a huge amount of money from Dirk, and had been paying it little by obeying his orders. Dirk had her sign a contract that restricted her to join a festa, so she wouldn't be able to pay off the debt with the prize money, and would remain in his service. However, this time, Dirk ordered her to destroy Iato and take part in the Phoenix Festa, as he was scared of his Servesta, and wanted to destroy it as soon as he could, since he already witnessed someone that wielded the same ogre lux. With their conversation over, Priscilla brought even more food, and the two stayed with them until nighttime before they decided to leave. Priscilla went to see them off, and apologized for the trouble her sister had caused them, but they would just battle it out tomorrow, and take out their anger so Priscilla didn't have to worry about anything. Irene was fighting for her sister's sake, and she was happy to give her blood from time to time, as it was the only way she could help her. But the gravy sheath worried her, as whenever Irene wielded it, she became more ferocious, and it was getting out of hand these recent days. On their way back to their dorms, Iato pitied the sisters, but Julius wanted him to focus his attention on the upcoming battle. Instead of going to the boys' dorm, Iato visited Claudia as he needed to talk to her about something. But Claudia was having a nightmare, and attacked Iato when she woke up. He kept on dodging, but she was too fast for him, and as he was about to turn into minced meat, he held Claudia's face and made her come back to her senses. Having realized what she had just done, Claudia apologized and asked Iato if he would join him at the Grips Festa tournament. But he couldn't do that until Julius joined him as well. Claudia felt jealous but expected something like this to happen, and already intended to ask Julius. Talking about herself, she told Iato that she had died more than 1,000 times in her dreams, as her ogre lux wants its wielder to experience death in return for its powers. It was a brutal payment to pay for power, as no dreams are the same, and she always dies in the most brutal ways possible. And for that reason, no one had been able to withstand this ogre lux for more than 3 days. Iato was surprised that Claudia was still sane, but she had to put up with her ogre lux, as it was the only way to fulfill her secret dream. Like humans, ogre lux also had their own personalities, and could change everything about its wielder to suit its own preferences. After learning about all this, Iato took his leave as he has a match tomorrow, even though Claudia wanted to develop plot with him all night. That's what I'm talking about! In the midst of an ongoing war, a young Priscilla was crushed underneath a huge slab of concrete, and was covered in blood. Irene immediately rushed to the hospital, and found Priscilla alive because of her abilities. The two sisters had no one beside themselves, and refused to be adopted by anyone until Dirk found them, and gave Irene the gravy sheath. Priscilla woke Irene from her memory dream, as it was time for their battle, and she sucked her blood to prepare for the fight. Before the match started, Iato was lost in thoughts, and told Julius something he wanted to try in their upcoming battle. Julius didn't care about their methods as long as they win, and she gets the money to help her orphan friends. Both teams stepped into the arena for the final battle of the Phoenix Festa, and when the fight started, Julius and Iato instantly chased after Irene. Julius hit Irene with her fire bolts, and Iato went into close combat and almost got a hit on her, but she managed to block it in the nick of time. They were impressed by how she managed to fight in a 2 versus 1 situation. But Irene reminded them that her powers belonged to both her and her sister. After her speech about sisterhood, she attacked Iato with a gravity well, which he dodged in time. But her real intentions were to set up a defensive barrier for Priscilla, and sucked so much bodily fluids out of her that she dropped to the floor. Iato asked if it was the right thing for her to do, but she told him to shut the fuck up, and attacked both of them with gravity well. But they dodged it again at the last second. Julius threw fireballs at Irene to distract her, and Iato used this opportunity to attack Irene. But when their ogre lux collided, Iato was yeeted to a wall behind him. They almost hit Irene, but it was a close call, and Julius wanted to speed things up as the battle was going on for more than 5 minutes. And Iato can't use his real powers for much longer. Realizing that they were trying to go after the gravity sheath, it was her turn to payback. So she conjured an uncountable amount of gravity balls to throw them towards her opponents. Focusing all his prana, Iato went into a trance-like state and sliced all of the gravity balls. Irene was surprised at what she just saw, and Iato immediately exchanged blows with her. Julius managed to trap Irene in her deadliest magic, and a huge explosion occurred that engulfed the whole arena with ash and fire. But Irene blocked the attack with the power of her ogre lux. Back in her senses, Priscilla immediately went to check out her sister, but Irene wasn't in her right senses, and approached Priscilla with a mean look on her face. Realizing that something bad was about to happen, Iato tried to rescue Priscilla, but the force of gravity coming from Irene was too strong to even let them move. It wasn't Irene controlling her body anymore, as the grabby sheath took over, and Ayato moved closer to Irene inch by inch to talk her out of this. But Irene had already lost her sense of self, and started to release dangerous shockwaves that rattled the whole arena. At that instance, his Servesta told him to grow some balls, and he powered up himself. Charging up his Ogre Lux, Ayato removed all the gravity magic around the battlefield, and gave it his all to destroy the grabby sheath. As her Ogre Lux was destroyed, the Seidoken Academy team was declared the winner, but Ayato fell onto the floor because of the pain. Watching the fight, Dirk realized that Ayato can only maintain his power for a specific amount of time. He wondered if he hired too many people to go after him. But he remembered that he was Hiraku's brother, and was capable of doing unexplainable things. The sight of this marvelous battle was enjoyed throughout the academies, and the secret of his powers were revealed to everyone as well. With the battle over, Priscilla was admitted to a hospital because Irene drained too much blood out of her, and she was sitting beside her bed until she woke up. They had lost the battle, and Irene lost her OP-ass weapon as well. But it was all for the best as it freed Irene from her shackles. At the Seidoken Academy, Ayato was unable to move his body because of breaking the seal on his powers. But he still remained optimistic, and would do this again for Julie's anytime. As Ayato had her back all the time, Julie's promised to cherish him forever too. Listen, Hayato's inside. Set your heart ablaze, go beyond your limits, and watch this next video.